what you are basically. Deep, deep down, far, far in, is simply the fabric and structure of existence itself.
Peace for all men and women, for all men and women, for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, peace in all time.
Honestly expressing yourself.
Peace for all men and women, for all men and women, for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, peace in all time.
The fabric and structure of existence itself.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Parallel Mike podcast. I'm your host, Mike, and a big thank you for joining me for our latest episode. On tonight's show, we have a returning guest. His name is Bibhu Misra, and he wrote a fantastic book titled Yuga Shift, which is all about how humanity goes through these periods of rising consciousness and then falling consciousness, and it's separated into 4 epochs. Sometimes we refer to them as the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, the Silver Age, and then the Golden Age. And in the Golden Age, of course, it's when we have our full potential realized. So it's when we make great works, we live in harmony, we are strong, we live longer, we have a full range of capabilities in terms of the things that human beings are capable of. But then we fall back down towards the Iron Age, and that's the age that we have just been in. The Indians call it the Kali Yuga. But this is something that's been observed throughout all cultures, whether it was the Romans or the Greeks, the Egyptians. They have all had a concept of this great cycle. Now, in the Kali Yuga, we become much more likely to have wars. We become more combative. We lose our empathy. We become more decayed in terms of our spirituality and our morality. And that is precisely the age that we've just lived through. Now, the good news is Bibhu predicted in his book that we came out of that age on the spring equinox of 2025, so just the other month. And at that point, Bibhu says that we will start to feel the energies of the next stage, but we do go through a period of cataclysm. And this ties in with biblical prophecy. It ties in with the prophecy of many different tribes and belief structures across the world who believe that we go through an ending of an age or the end of time even. Of course, it doesn't mean literally. It means that we end the current age and we go into the next cycle. So this really does feed into many of the things we've been discussing. And Bibhu believes that we are now in that period of transition where we're going to see some real cataclysms and the collapse of all of the old structures and systems that were attached to the Kali Yuga to make way for the next stage. So that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. And I'm going to get Bibhu's take on everything that's happened thus far in 2025 and find out what he thinks is coming next. So very important episode, and I'm excited to get into it. Members, please head over to parallelmike.com to sign in and listen to the full episode. And of course, if you're not a member yet, but you are enjoying the content, please consider coming over to parallelmike.com and becoming a member to access part 2 of each and every episode. In closing, I hope you're all well, healthy, and reasonably happy. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Parallel Mike podcast. We are joined by Bibhu Misra. Bibhu, you was on the show on episode number 5464. And it's really great to have you back on. I really enjoyed our previous 2 conversations, so I've been looking forward to this one. So thank you so much for joining us. Just before we get started, Bibhu, can you tell listeners just a little bit about who you are and what we spoke about during our first 2 conversations?
Well, first of all, Mike, thanks for having me back on your show. And I distinctly remember our conversations last year, which were pretty interesting. And some of the first ones that I did after my book came out. Year before last, December of 2023. So my book is called The Yuga Shift, and it's displayed prominently behind your head. And it's about the end of the cycle that we call the Kali Yuga, which is the lowest point of human consciousness. So as per modern historians, our civilization moves in a linear pattern from cavemen to our civilization, whereas most ancient cultures believe that civilization moves in grand cycles of ascending and descending consciousness. So we descend from a golden age to a dark age. And as per that framework, we're right now in a dark age called Kali Yuga in the Indian framework, whereas the Greeks knew it as the Iron Age. And my calculations showed that we end the Kali Yuga in 2025, March 21st, 2025 to be precise. And this date does not only signify the end of the Kali Yuga or the Iron Age, but the end of the entire descending cycle of consciousness, which started after the end of the Ice Age at around 9700 BCE. So it's a big transition, a big shift. And every time we go through one of these shifts or the transitions between the ages, a lot of things happen. Things the changes in the social structures, the financial structures, civilizations collapse, a lot of catastrophes, natural catastrophes. And there's also a change in energy. So consciousness itself changes. And that is the kind of period that we are now going into. So we are already in the period of shift. So starting March 21st, 2025, we have already entered into the shift from a calendric perspective. But purely looking at it from the point of view of the events that have been happening in the world, I think we entered the shift a few months earlier than that. In January itself, it was becoming very clear that we have entered into this period of transition out of the Kali Yuga. And that makes this particular time period a time of changes and transitions and possibilities.
Yeah, I remember distinctly as well, Bibhu, in our last two conversations when you mentioned this March 2025 date, that this was really the kind of trigger for this shift where we went out of the Kali Yuga. And I asked you at the time, do you think that we're going to notice things changing? And you said, well, I don't know about that. So I was looking forward with trepidation this year to see if I noticed anything, but I just gave up after January because so much was happening, so much chaos in the world and structures falling apart, geopolitical war, the financial system, that I said, well, Bibhu's going to be proven right on that date no matter what, because clearly the world is going through something. So I think it was a big call that you made, but for now at least, it certainly seems like we are on that timeline. And how did you feel about this year, Bibhu, going into it? Did you have any trepidation? Was you anxious about it, or was you just like so certain it was going to be as you thought that you was just prepared for it?
Yeah, to be honest, Mike, I did not expect anything very drastic or very dramatic to happen because the shift occurs over a period of years, few years, sometimes decades or centuries. So I did not expect anything specifically dramatic or catastrophic to happen in 2025 itself. But I was surprised by the kind of events that started happening right from January itself, which told me that it's begun. The shift has begun and it has started in a very strong manner, just so that there is no kind of hesitancy or no kind of doubt that we are indeed going into this transition. And the first event that happened in the month of January was that devastating fire in LA. And the reason why that was important is because the period of transition that we are going into right now is what the Greeks called ekpyresis, or the time of cleansing by fire. So this is the time that you're going to see a lot of fire events like wildfires or even volcanic eruptions, wars, because wars involve explosions. So these are the kind of events that will probably play an important role in this period of transition. That is what I had proposed in my book. And the year started off with that devastating wildfire in LA. Remember that this is not the time, this is not the season for wildfires. The typical season for wildfires in California starts in autumn. And this was in January, and it caused so much devastation out there that I got the feeling that this is a very distinct message to us from the universe that the period of ekpyresis has started. And then it was followed by so many fires all over the world. In March, you had that fire in South Korea, the most devastating fire that they have experienced ever. Japan went through its worst fires ever, again in February, March timeframe. And then you had that fire in Jerusalem, in Israel, the capital of US. And then you had fires in so many places across the US. I mean, I can't name all of them, but, Oklahoma and Carolinas, New Jersey, they're all over the news. So that was an indication that even though we are not in a fire season, the fires have really grown. And even in the UK is currently going through some of the worst fires it has ever experienced. So these are indications that the period of ekpyrosis has begun. But I must also clarify that ekpyrosis doesn't mean cleaning by fire, external fire only. It's also the internal fire of wisdom and knowledge. And that is also started. That I think that has also started because a lot of people are intuitively feeling that we are going through something big. Some big changes are there on the horizon, and they're also becoming more open to exploring these ideas from many different perspectives rather than their own cultural or religious or traditional perspectives. There's a common, I would say, a common planetary consciousness which is emerging, and that is good because without that, I think in order to go into a higher age, there has to be a common planetary consciousness. We can't keep on, thinking about ourselves. The selfish interests have to go down, and you have to think about the welfare of all people, the entire nature, the entire planet. That should be the driving, I would say, the dharma of the higher age.
Yeah, I've been noticing all of that as well, Bibhu, and I've tried on my podcast where we're speaking now to kind of collate different voices who are looking at this from different perspectives, whether that's the Eastern Orthodox Church. I had a priest on recently, a father. I've had people who are into kind of more the New Age stuff. I've had you who's got this big overview of the big celestial cycle. And everyone's feeling the same stuff. Everyone's talking about the same things. And I think the people who are able to becoming more forgiving of other people's beliefs. They're actually looking to see the similarities rather than see where we diverge and being very, I would say, like ironclad in belief structures. Like, no, if you don't believe this, you're wrong. I'm starting to notice people become much more tolerant of each other. And then at the other side of that, the people who are kind of going the other direction, they're becoming less tolerant, and that's leading to more antagonism and chaos. And this year, Bibhu, we've had so much chaos. The list. I didn't even write the list down. I could just say off the top of my head. You mentioned the wildfires, but we've seen the global trade system start to collapse. The monetary system's falling apart. We've seen, the geopolitical tensions are wild, but then also things like America saying to Greenland or Canada, we're just going to take your land and your stuff, and the Middle East war. So there's so much that we could discuss, but let's kind of just dial it back to begin with, Bibhu. The Yuga cycle, as you lay it out in your book, it goes from the Kali Yuga all the way to the Golden Age, which is that aspirational age where it's about truth, harmony, and we live longer and we're much more in tune with ourselves in terms of, let's say, our spiritual capacities. And where we are now is at that lowest stage. And then you say that we go through this transition period at the end of the Kali Yuga. Can you just speak to that a little bit more, Bibhu? You call it ekpyrosis, which is the Greek expression for this. What should we expect, and why does that last so long? 1,200 years is an awfully long time to transition, right?
Yeah, what the Greeks said was that at the end of the ascending cycle, which ended with the Golden Age, we go through a period that they called cataclysmus, which means the great winter. And that is the time that the world is renewed by ice and water. And we did go through such a period, which historians and archaeologists refer to as the Younger Dryas period. And that was a time when global temperatures had plummeted by around 10 to 15 degrees Celsius everywhere, and all the ice age megafauna, they disappeared. And scientists have now found out that there was a very powerful comet impact which took place at around 10,900 BCE, and that was followed by a spate of comet impacts throughout that Younger Dryas period, which lasted for around 1,200 years. And now we are at the exact opposite point where we are ending the descending cycle of consciousness with the Kali Yuga. And this time we are going through this period called ekpyrosis, which the Greeks referred to as the great summer of the great year, when the world is renewed by fire. So if the great winter is of 1,200 years duration, then it's logical that the great summer will also be of 1,200 years duration. And when you factor in those extended periods of transition, what happens is that the complete cycle becomes exactly equal to 25,800 years, which is the precession cycle of the Earth. And so that is the reason that I felt that these values are correct, because it's imperative that the Yuga cycle or the cycle of the ages is backed up by a known astronomical cycle, because all the other time cycles that we have, such as the cycles of day and night or the cycles of seasons, they occur due to known astronomical phenomena, the revolution of the Earth or the rotation of the Earth. Similarly, the precession of the equinoxes is also a known astronomical phenomena because, and during this cycle, what happens is that the position of the background star changes over a period of 25,800 years. Position of the background star on the spring equinox date of March 21st changes slowly over a period of 25,800 years. And this is called precession of the equinoxes. And in my book, what I had proposed is that the entire solar system rotates on its axis as it revolves around the galactic center. And it is because of the rotation of the solar system that we see the background stars slowly shifting over time. So that is why I think that we are now going into this 1200-year period of transition called ekpyresis. But the entire period is not going to be so catastrophic because when we look at some of the prophecies and some of the astronomical data, it seems that it is from the period 2025 to 2040 that we might experience a period of great turbulence and journey. So this is going to be that roller coaster ride that we go through. And after 2040, things would have calmed down to a large extent. But that entire 1200-year period is the time when we lay down the groundwork, do the foundational work for the new cycle to emerge. So that's what this period of ekpyresis is all about. In some of the prophecies, we find references to this period. For instance, in the Revelations, it says that after Christ returns for the second time, he is going to set up his kingdom on earth for 1,000 years. And I believe that refers to the 1,000 years of ekpyresis. And similarly, in the Kala Chakra Tantra, which is the sacred text of the Tibetan Buddhists, it says that after Rudra Chakran is the celestial figure who is going to return to restore righteousness after the end of this age. Rudra Chakran is also going to establish Shambhala. Shambhala means the ideal kingdom, the kingdom of peace and tranquility and abundance. He is going to establish Shambhala on earth for a period of 1,000 years. So these two texts are in perfect resonance with each other. And I believe this 1,000-year period refers to the 1,000-year, roughly 1,000-year period of transition that we will go through. So it's not going to be like 1,000 years of turbulence and chaos. It's basically, the way I look at it is it's like a 15-year window of turbulence and chaos and great transformation. And after that, it basically turns into a really good time to live in.
Well, that's a little bit of good news, Bibhu. We don't have 1,200 years of this. Not that either of us would be there to see out the end of that anyways. But we do have, yeah, as you said, 15 years is what you're predicting. And I think whichever angle we look at this, I think most people I speak to believe that we're going through a period of great transition. And you can actually see, can't you, Bibhu, the old structures are falling apart. The monetary system's falling apart. The relationships between nations are fracturing and splintering. And it's almost like this old oligarchy is coming under much more scrutiny. I even had a friend of mine the other day who is about as conservative in terms of their opinions. And I don't mean conservative politically. I mean, they don't look outside the box. They're very much mainstream. Talking about chemtrails and saying, oh, the chemtrailing the skies again. And I couldn't believe it. I never would have thought this person would discuss something like that with me. They would have called me a conspiracy theorist 10 years ago if I'd have mentioned it to them. So there's certainly this period of awakening or revelation happening as well. So that's the exciting part, but it is going to be a turbulent time for us all. So can we talk a little bit about how this consciousness starts to come back, Bibhu? We're seeing people start to become more inquisitive. And you mentioned the central black hole at the center of the Milky Way. Can you talk a little bit about that for listeners?
Yeah, what happens is that our black hole goes through a cycle of its own. And it's not just our black hole. Every galaxy which has a black hole at its center, it goes through a cycle of its own. At some points, it becomes extremely active, and that's when it radiates a lot of EM energies at all frequencies, from infrared to gamma rays. And that's when the nucleus of the galaxy, it becomes extremely luminous, extremely brilliant, and it outshines the light from the rest of the galaxy put together. So that's what scientists refer to as the active galactic nucleus. And what I had proposed is that when the nucleus becomes like this luminous body, that's when we go through the ascending cycle, because it is that particular light which activates the dormant DNA within our body. You know that we have a lot of junk DNA. Nearly 98% of our DNA is junk DNA. It does not code for any protein. And scientists don't have any idea why it's there at all. And what I proposed is that some of that DNA could get active, and that's when it triggers all kinds of changes in our consciousness and in our physical structures, in our physiology. And at the end of the ascending cycle, that's when the black hole shuts off again. And that's when the energy in the outer galaxy dips off gradually. And that's when we go through the descending cycle, when all of these negative mutations start coming back. And we lose our consciousness, we lose our physical size. And all of that happens. We know from data that over the last 12,000 years, our physical size has shrunk by around 10 to 20%. Our cranial capacity has shrunk by 10 to 17%. Diseases have become more rampant. There's more violence, because when you look at the skeletons around 12,000 years ago, there was no sign of violence. But along the way, over the Holocene period, the skeletons are showing more and more signs of violent warfare. So this has actually happened. It's recorded in the fossil data. What I said was that towards the end of the Kali Yuga, that is around 2025 or sometime afterwards, the black hole is going to switch on. And that's when we are going to get some high frequency radiation, which is going to start awakening us and giving us those DNA upgrades that we need for this transition. And that is actually happening already. Because what scientists have found out is that over the last 1 year, they have been observing the central black hole of the Milky Way using the James Webb Space Telescope. And they found out that over this entire 1 year period, the black hole has been giving out bright flashes of light on a daily basis, on top of on top of many smaller flashes of smaller durations. And this has never happened before. Our black hole was very quiet. It used to give out occasional X-ray flares and a lot of infrared radiation, but it never radiated anything else. And now all of a sudden, over the last 1 year, it has been radiating intense flashes of visible light. And that is a big change. And I think that's a sign that the black hole is now going into its active state. It's not yet fully in its active state, because when that happens, it's going to radiate gamma rays and X rays and ultraviolet rays and everything. So it's going into its active state. And since that has already happened, I suspect that is the reason that we see this awakening of consciousness, that people are now able to see through the lies and deceptions a lot more easily. So it's coming out in the open, and that a lot of truth is coming out to the surface and helping people to make a judgment as to where they stand exactly. A lot of truth about our past, about our origins is also now coming out. And the discovery under the pyramids of a possible structure under the pyramids that goes down, like few hundred meters, that is also a big discovery. We're still in the initial stages of that. We don't know if there's actually something down there, but if there is, it completely changes our perspective about how the pyramids were built and the kind of technological capabilities that the people in the ancient times had. So that is also shifting. And I think the black hole, the activation of the black hole and the light coming in from the galactic center is playing a role in that. And it could also be driving the environmental phenomena that we are now seeing. The wildfires could be a result of these new energies that are coming in and heating up the core and the mantle of the earth and basically causing these fires. We're seeing so many violent storms. Very powerful tornadoes, very powerful floods, and that's because the ocean water is also heating up. And scientists have found that the water at the lower levels of the ocean, they're becoming hotter, which is something that never used to happen before. And we see a lot of magma movement. A lot of places, the volcanoes are erupting all over the Pacific belt of fire. The volcanoes have started becoming active. We are seeing these earthquake swarms in places like Santorini and in Naples, in the Campi Flegrei area. And so a lot of things happening in the I would say the mantle and the core of the earth. It's almost as if our planet has kind of woken up after a period of dormancy, is now trying to purge itself of some of the stuff that it doesn't need. And so these environmental changes are, I mean, quite concerning on one hand, and on the other hand, it's a confirmation that we are actually going into this period of change that all the ancient texts and prophecies and the traditions tell us about.
Yeah, I've certainly noticed it, and it's kind of being close to home. I told you before the show, I had a friend who was actually there with the California wildfires. Her home was the last one on the street not to burn down. So, well, the first one not to burn down. Everything beyond that was destroyed. And then I think it was a few weeks later, or maybe a few weeks before. I can't remember, Bibu, because there's so many crises that have happened. But the place where me and my wife often go to stay got flooded out completely. The entire region was flooded. A lot of the houses got destroyed. And I was there just a few weeks after the flood, and the damage was just awful. And it was the worst floods in 30 years. This was kind of on the border between two European countries. We saw this as well in Spain. So there's so much happening across the world. And I'm also noticing a lot of people are starting to tell me that they're feeling strange, which is an interesting one. So I had a friend recently tell me that the sun feels very potent right now, and he couldn't really describe what he was feeling, just that it feels really strong, and he can't spend as much time in it as he used to, not because of the heat, just because of some kind of energetic change to it. And he's not really the kind of person to discuss those things normally. So I'm wondering, as somebody who's written this book, Bibu, and you've got a community across the world now who are watching your work and watching what's happening, are you hearing feedback like that as well? Are people getting in touch with you and experiencing strange phenomena right now?
Yes, they are, and the reactions and the effects that different people are feeling are different. To someone who's already aware that we are going through a shift and is making a conscious choice to align with inner spirit and align with the planetary vibrations and the energies that are coming in, they're feeling a positive effect. They're feeling like more powerful meditative sessions. They're feeling more euphoria. They're getting more powerful intuitive thoughts which are coming true, more synchronicities. So some people are having a positive effect, whereas others are feeling like their bodies are feeling more tired. They're feeling more tired, more a lot of negative thoughts from the past are coming up. A lot of negative emotions from the past are coming up. There, some people are getting more easily anxious and scared and frightened for no apparent reason, as if they don't even know how to express it. They're getting more scared and anxious and destabilized. And we know that recently there was a flare up of tensions between India and Pakistan, and a lot of people got really, I would say, they were really affected emotionally by what was going on. So there is a definite emotional effect and psychological effect of the energies that are coming in. And these energies that are coming in from the core of our galaxy, it's coming in through the different stars and as well as our sun. And right now we are going through a solar maxima. So the energies that are coming from the sun are also more powerful, and it's possibly sending us some of that light from the galactic core, and and that's giving us the DNA upgrades. And if those DNA upgrades are kind of rewiring you or recalibrating your physiology, then you're going to feel different and odd, and you wouldn't really know what's going on if you're not aware that we are going through a shift.
And what response do you think there is from the people who have a vested interest in trapping us in this Kali Yuga and material age where they've had all of the power? Are you seeing, or are you at least, I guess, looking out into the world and interpreting, oh, I see what these people are trying to do? I mean, we discussed in the first one things like the Great Reset and these kind of agendas to take us towards transhumanism, AI, synthetic DNA, which is the opposite direction, I guess, of what you're talking about. So, how are you interpreting that, Bibhu? Are they more successful than you expected? Do you think this is going to go on for much longer, or do you expect there to be some kind of black swan that shifts the energy back towards humanity? Let's say.
It's a mix of both right now. I mean, there's certain truths which are coming out, like a lot of truth about the pandemic is now coming out for people to see and recognize and realize the mistakes that they made by branding everybody who was trying to warn them as a conspiracy theorist. So that's now coming out in the open. And then there's a lot of other things about, like you mentioned, chemtrails, that's becoming more mainstream. And the realization that a lot of these AI technologies, they might be used for the enslavement of humanity and may not really serve the purpose of making us turn us into a more utopian society, which is the ideology that they will try to push on us. That kind of a realization is also coming into people. So yeah, so people are becoming more uh, open and more they're kind of they're seeing through the lies and the deceptions. But on the other hand, the energies are also turning people, I would say, they're becoming more easily irritated and angry, and I would say more desperate. So the elites who are kind of running the show, they will become, I think, more and more desperate. They wouldn't really care if you figure out what they're trying to do or what they're planning to do. They will do it in your face because now they're getting desperate. Now they're seeing that if they don't do certain things, then their power is going to slip away. And so I think we might see new wars breaking out, which people will predict anyway, but they'll still do it anyway. So that's the kind of a situation that we are going into, where the wars will start and people will predict that this war is going to happen for this particular reason and this particular false flag will be carried out. And they'll still do it because they're now so desperate to retain their hold and their hegemony on the affairs of the world. So there is going to be an increased desperation, and they're definitely going to try and make a last ditch effort to reimpose their power, which they are losing because of these energies that are coming in. And in my new article that I wrote a few months back, what I proposed, what I foresaw, I would say, is that the period from 2029 to 2036 is possibly the time that the biblical prophecies refer to as the 7 years of tribulation. And that is the time that we might experience the greatest transformation and the greatest shifts. The reason for that is that we have this, first of all, 2036 for me is like a culmination date. That's the date that Edgar Casey also talks about in his prophecies as the date when the Messiah comes back, or we see the star of the Savior. And by that, I think he meant a comet that is going to come in and carry out a lot of, I would say, not only the destruction, but also reseeding the earth with new life and new water and restore the abundance and fertility. So 2036 for me is kind of a culmination date for this caliber cycle, which means that the time period from 2029 to 2036 is potentially the time of the 7 years of tribulation. And almost in confirmation of that, we have the asteroid Apophis, which is making two close flybys to the Earth, once in 2029 and once in 2036, which I interpret as a message to us from the universe telling us that these are the prophetic times when the prophecies will be fulfilled. And if that is true, then by 2029, we might see the rise of an antichrist like figure, a very powerful ruler who might try to impose the AI regulated new world order on us through mandates. And that is something that could happen by that period. And all of the events that are happening now could lead up to the rise of that powerful figure in 2029.
Wow. That's quite a lot, Bibhu.
Yeah.
I don't really know where to go with that one, that we're entering Revelations, but I'm joking, of course, because I've discussed this with many people. I think a lot of people actually agree with you. I think the Christians agree with what you're saying. I think people who are in tune with what's really going on and maybe not falling for the mainstream propaganda are certainly thinking it. And as I said, there's people that are very mainstream in their thinking, even those people are aware something's not right. They're talking about things that I wouldn't have believed 10 years ago, just how many people would be discussing things that I class, I guess, in the conspiracy realm, but it's becoming normal place. Not all of it's good because a lot of those people don't have the discernment to handle that information. So they are just swimming in all of this information and they're finding it very difficult to live through it. But I think if you've got a little bit of spiritual discernment, it's actually a refreshing time to be alive as well, because it reminds you that things do get better. You know, there's going to be, I think you call it in the book and in your most recent article, like a purification. And in fact, I'm just going to read a quote, Bibhu. I'd love to get your take on this quote from your most recent article, which I'll put the link to in the description. You said, We must remember that as the old forms and power structures collapse due to internal conflicts, financial issues, revolutions, wars, or environmental catastrophes, it will cause chaos and suffering. I think of it as a collective rehab that we may need to go through in order to wean us away from our addictions and material obsessions so that we can find the wisdom and light, the joy and contentment within us that can heal us and take us forward on our path. And I thought that was a really nice way of kind of framing it as a kind of collective rehab. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more, Bibhu. It kind of feels like what you're saying there is that this is necessary. We have to go through this because of the excesses of the old age that we've just come out of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we must go through it, but we may need to go through it because, and this is something that we can also realize intuitively, because if the financial structures collapse at some point, or if the societal structures collapse at some point, then we might be left to fend for ourselves. And that would be a time that we are not having access to all of these luxuries that we now seem to consider as needs. So we need to go back to the basic needs and not get so attached to the material luxuries that we have become so comfortable with. That is necessary because that allows us to come back in tune with our inner source, with our inner divinity, and to realize that we really don't need so many things to be happy. And if you go to some of the poor village folk, I mean, in India, if I go to some of the villages and I interact with the poor folk out there, they're so happy. I mean, they don't really think that they lack anything because they have the basic needs fulfilled, and they radiate a kind of happiness and light through themselves, which you won't find in a city where everybody thinks that he's somehow falling back in the race and he needs to have that certain amount of wealth or power in order to be considered successful, or in order to feel happy. So that is something that we might have to learn as a collective in this process of transition that we are going through right now.
Do you think that as this continues, Bibhu, there's going to be bigger and bigger deceptions? I'm thinking specifically of a certain man who keeps talking about the golden age. And there's a lot of people who believe that we are going into a golden age, but this isn't the golden age that you're talking about. So I'm wondering, do you feel like that's a part of it too? There's going to be lots of false dawns and people claiming to be the Messiah, claiming to be a savior, and it's going to lead to either more chaos or just take them right back to where they was before.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be definitely going to happen, because people are going to take advantage of the current situation, and anybody who can take, use this situation to his advantage and become more powerful, he's going to do that. And our political structures or our corporate structures, whoever is at the top, he has gotten there by a lot of deceptions. He hasn't gotten there by hard work or through honesty. Gotten there by deceptions, and he's going to try and use it to his advantage. And so, yeah, a lot of people fake prophets will rise up, fake leaders will come up. And if you're a Christian, you know that last time Christ came here, nobody recognized him except for a few handful of followers, and he was executed. And this time too, I think people will mistake the wrong guy to be the savior. Most people will mistake the wrong guy or the wrong guys to be the savior. And so that deception is definitely going to happen. I do see it happening. And it's only towards the end of this process that we might wake up from our collective stupor and the collective deception.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not a golden age right now. They're just capitalizing on the idea that is now circulating on the internet. A lot of people are hopeful for a new golden age appearing, and they're basically manipulating the people using that term. It's not a golden age by any means. We are just getting started with the end of this transition. We're just getting started with the transition right now.
Yeah, I think that's obvious to anyone who's a little bit more thinking, because you can see around us that people are more hyper materialist than ever before. People are more selfish and greedy than ever before. And there's so much toxicity in the world, whether that's the things that we eat and put into our bodies, the things we consume psychologically and watch and listen to. And yeah, it certainly doesn't feel like we're going towards some golden age. It feels like there's more to go. But you do say that the Kali Yuga is over, and yet there's still in my opinion, it feels like we've still got more to go in terms of the world downsliding. So how do you explain that, Bibhu? Is it that we can continue to decline in one regard, but we're also actually moving up in another regard, like let's say conscious spirituality and those things? How do you explain that, Bibhu?
Yeah, see, the Kali Yuga is over, but the dense materialistic energies don't go away in a day. So it's almost as if the layers of darkness will get peeled off one after the other. And in the meantime, the powerful spiritual energies which are going to elevate us, those will also start coming in, and that's already coming in, I believe. And so the collapse of the old system and the emergence of the new humanity, those will go on in parallel for some time. So I see that the next 15 years, you'll see that on one hand, there's a new humanity which is coming up, a new human who is emerging, who is more in tune with his inner self, who has a planetary consciousness, who thinks about the welfare of everyone, who follows the golden rule in his life. On the other hand, you'll find people who are still stuck to the ideologies and beliefs of the Kali Yuga, the greed and the selfishness and the hatred. Those people will remain stuck in the Kali Yuga consciousness because they haven't gone through as many lifetimes as the other people. So we have this many cycles of reincarnation, and those who have gone through many such cycles would be more evolved and they'll be more in tune with the emerging reality, whereas others who haven't gone through so many cycles, they will still remain trapped in the Kali Yuga ideologies of greed and hatred and selfishness. And so that portion will carry on for some time. That portion will might even gain in power and dominance at some point. Like I said, if 2029 to 2036 is the 7 years of tribulation, then in 2029 you might find that all of a sudden that other side, which is the Kali Yuga energies, are making a comeback and they're kind of trying to reestablish their dominance. But there's going to be a resistance as well. So I don't see it having a complete hegemony over the entire world, but they might have some limited success for some time in imposing that AI regulated beast system on people where you have to get chipped and you need to inject yourself with a nanosensor-laced vaccine so that they can monitor all your thoughts and your physiology. So that sounds like science fiction, but it's not. That's the direction in which they're headed. And all of this talk that we have about, acquiring Greenland or acquiring all of these mineral resources is because they want to install AI as the fundamental basis of a civilization. And they need all of that rare earth for making those robots and those AI-based systems. So they're making a really big push in that direction. And you know that digital currencies are now coming into the EU. And the EU has also been talking about having a military conflict with Russia by 2030, and they're arming themselves for that. They have already increased their military budget. A lot of defense ministers of the European countries were talking about a potential conflict with Russia, China, and Iran by 2030, 2029, 2030. That's the time frame they have in mind. And in addition to that, according to the World Economic Forum, it is by 2030 that the new world order should be in place, where you'll own nothing and be happy. So it's all of those things are kind of coming together in that 2029, 2030 timeframe, which is why I feel like that could be the beginning of that tribulation period. And there's another interesting correlation. In 2029, you'll have the next American elections. So the next president and vice president will be selected. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of them is the Antichrist and maybe the other guy is the false prophet for all you know.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised actually, because we're seeing all of the chess pieces on the board get into position for everything that Revelations discusses. For people that aren't familiar with Revelations, you'll know at least about the beast system, which is, like you said, where you can't buy or sell without some sign, or in this instance, it would probably be a chip or a sensor in your hand. And whether you look at CBDCs or Bitcoin, it's the same system. One's a private version, one's public version, but essentially they're both doing the same thing, and you can easily see how they could be weaponized against us. And then it says also in Daniel 9:27 that the Antichrist signs a covenant with Israel for 7 years, and that inaugurates the tribulation period. Now, I could certainly see that because we just saw the destruction of Gaza. We're seeing that take place right now, but we're also seeing America start to align itself in a new way and say, well, we might take over Gaza. So that would require some kind of agreement with Israel, and that could be the covenant. I don't know if you follow this side of things as much as I might do. I'm not huge on following it, but I certainly keep my eyes on it. The red heifer got sent across to Israel, which is really important for the building of the third temple. So all of these things are starting to line up. And yeah, it feels to me like if it's going to happen, Bibhu, now's the time it's probably going to start to unfold. And when we look at Revelations, there's a lot of big things that happen during those 7 years. There's a great war, there's suffering, famine, disease. A fourth of the world dies, which would be about 1.5 billion people. That's Revelation's fourth seal. One fourth of the population dies. Then we have the sixth seal, which is when God pours out mighty earthquakes and all kinds of rocks start to fall on people and collapse villages and towns. The seventh seal is judgment, ending the first quarter of the tribulation. And then it gets even worse. We get the day of God's wrath. So this isn't going to be an easy period if that is what we're going into, right, Bibhu? And therefore, I guess time's at the essence for people who want to start to align themselves with the next stage. And that would be the best protection from all of this, is to actually get yourself right spiritually and in terms of where you're thinking, which would mean, I guess, separating yourself from the materialist age. Is that correct, Bibhu, how you would put it?
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing, that when we read about these prophecies mentioned in the Revelation, they talk a lot about this fire falling from the sky or the rocks falling from the sky. And I believe that they are talking about comet swarm or a meteor swarm hitting the Earth. And as it so happens that in the years 2032 and 2036, we'll pass death centered through the Taurid swarm of comets and meteors, which is located within the Taurid meteor stream. We'll be passing right through the center of that swarm, which contains, as many astronomers have already told us, a large number of dormant comets and meteors. And if those comets and meteors become active during that time frame, then we could see a lot of those stuff happening, which is mentioned in the Revelation. And these kind of prophecies are also there in the other prophecies like the Hindu texts and the Buddhist texts about the end time. It's been a time when the horse riding Messiah is going to come. And a horse is a symbolic representation of a particular comet known as a horse comet. It actually looks like a horse in motion. So I think these are descriptions of a period that will go through a comet swarm or a meteor swarm. So that's one of the things that I wanted to add. The second one is, as far as our own personal safety is concerned, I think people will be guided. People will be guided by their own intuition as to what they need to do. Because if you're spiritually conscious, if you're aware of what's going on, if you're trying to connect with your inner spirit and radiate your truth and wisdom and love and joy, and you're not caught up in the decaying energies of the Kali Yuga, then you're basically making yourself ready for the new age that is coming. And all those people who do so would be guided by their own intuition to the safe places, whether you need to go somewhere else or whether you just need to stay put wherever you are. I think that is a guidance that every person will get for himself or herself, and nobody else can tell him that. I mean, I can't tell anybody else where he or she needs to go. That is something he or she has to figure out for himself. But the most important thing is your consciousness. If your consciousness is elevated, if you're letting go of all of those egoic draws, if you're letting go of all the past unresolved karma, we carry a lot of trauma with us, a lot of emotions, unresolved emotions, emotional baggages from the past. We need to let go of those things because we've had a number of incarnations through the Kali Yuga and we have accumulated a lot of those trauma and emotional baggages, unresolved conflicts or unspoken desires or lingering regrets. These are the things that we need to let go because that will help us to ascend with these energies. That will make us lighter, more joyous, and we'll be able to ascend with these energies rather than remain trapped in a specific cycle. So these are the kind of inner work that we need to do. And I think those of us who do that will make ourselves more ready to receive the guidance as to what we need to do and where we need to go, if at all we need to go somewhere.
Bibhu, I think that's a fantastic place to end for part number one. So that was really a nice part one. You gave some great information, but there's a lot more that I'd love to get into. I'd like to talk more about the asteroids because you mentioned some specific ones. You mentioned asteroid 2024 YR4. and how that acts as a celestial clock. You talk about the Taurid meteor swarm. So in part 2, we'll get into that, Bibhu, and we'll talk a little bit more about the test that humanity is really going to go through if this 7-year tribulation does happen. But one more time, Bibhu, thank you so much for joining us. Where can I direct listeners to buy your book?
Well, it's on Amazon. You just type Yuga Shift and you're going to get the book. And there's a Kindle version. And now I also have an audio version, which is narrated by AI voice. So if you don't have a problem with that, you can get that as well. And my website is called Ancient Inquiries. It's www.bibhudevmishra.com. And you'll find a lot of articles there, some of which are drawn from my book. So if you want to figure out if you want to read the book or not, you can go and read those articles. And if you like them, you can get the book.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book, because you really get into many different sciences and you show how they all link together with the Yuga cycle. And for those that understand a little bit about astronomy and astrology, you'll understand that there are huge cycles there and they're not benign. They're not just coincidental. You spoke in part 1 about junk DNA. That's crazy. There's no way that God created us with junk DNA. It's there for a reason. We just have to figure out what it is. But let's talk more about that in part 2, Bibhu. Thanks one more time for being on the show, and I look forward to continuing in part number 2.
What you are basically. Deep, deep down, far, far in, is simply the fabric and structure of existence itself.
Peace for all men and women, for all men and women, for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, peace in all time.
Honestly expressing yourself.
Peace for all men and women, for all men and women, for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, peace in all time.
The fabric and structure of existence itself.
Within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you the people have the power.
Peace for all men and women, for all men and women, for all men and women.
The fabric and structure of existence itself.
Honestly expressing yourself.
Peace for all men and women, for all men and women, for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, peace in all time.